All right, then. Here we are. We are live on YouTube. Welcome to the show. Today is a show about how to do a show, you could say. So it's an online conference about doing online conferencing. Welcome to all the 50,000 people out there. No, it's not quite 50,000, but yeah, there's quite a few. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today. So yeah, the last few weeks have been absolutely crazy, I think, for all of us. Very difficult times, I think, especially if you are a keynote speaker, because right now there aren't any keynotes. And we have to change pretty much how we do everything. But this is only a little part of the equation. Basically, you can safely say there's a time before Corona, and there's a time after Corona. And everything in between is up for discussion. And one thing is for sure, I think it's quite clear that everything is going to go online and remote now. I don't think people will stop seeing each other, stop speaking to each other, stop going to conferences. That's all going to come back, albeit probably in a quite different way. But it will change the equation, because now we're thinking about, you know, if it works now and we can talk now and we can learn online and we can do, you know, why wouldn't it work next year? I think that's going to really change our mindset. I mean, just think about if you're, for example, a Spotify user. Think about this, you know, years ago, we used to say, well, the internet stuff, you know, the sound quality is bad and the selection is bad, and, you know, but all of a sudden we got used to it, and now Spotify is like the new normal. And we don't go back to CDs, even though the sound is worse. So I think the habit change is going to be fundamental. Huge challenges coming our way in the next couple of months, and also for next year. And we'll talk a little bit about that before we go into the actual theme of the conference. But so we have 4 great panelists. Let's show all of them here. The primary mode of communication with us in this show is going to be the question and answer button. And that's on the lower left of the screen right here, right? Where you can see the Q&A, and you can post any question you want. Keep in mind, we are live on YouTube. So questions, whatever you post there, is going live on YouTube, and then in perpetuity, you could say, captured for everybody else. That same goes for the chats. And of course, if we asked you to join the meeting with audio and video, same thing, this is going live on YouTube, right? So please, if you want to talk, there's a tool called hand raising, where you can raise your hand, you say, I want to speak. And when you use that tool, then our moderator, which I'll introduce shortly, will see it and bring you into the conversation if we have time. Okay, so please don't lift your hand, and if you're not equipped for actually speaking in a quiet room or with a decent video feed and so on. Let's show the 4 people in the show, and then I'll do my short intro. So I'd get us back onto the feed, all 4. So I think you have us pinned right now. So yeah, let's put 4 people together here on the gallery view. I think here we are. Okay. Yeah, so, okay, here we are. There's all 4 of us. So there's Antoni Lacinai. Antoni will speak about himself shortly, but he's based in Sweden or Copenhagen? Sweden, right? Sweden, yeah.
Sweden.
Yeah, and he's also a member of the TheFuturesAgency. Then on the lower right is Åsa. I always say awesome, right? That's a Degermark, right? Degermark, yeah. And she is a online
Sweden too, actually.
It's Sweden, yes. Oh, sorry, I'm getting confused here. Now it's basically all virtual now. And here's our brave moderator, Soha Rashid. She's based in Turku, Finland.
Hi, everyone.
She's also part of the TheFuturesAgency. So I'm going to just show you a couple slides to get into the framework of what we're doing here and why we're even bothering with an online conference. And then Antoni will start with his talk about providing tips and tricks. If you have questions, please use the question bar down there. There is also a chat, but it's quite likely that we will not be able to do a lot of chatting, because there's going to be a lot of questions. We're also going to be placing some links and assets like PDFs into the chat box. And of course, after the show, you can download the whole thing by going to my blog, futurewithgerd.com. There's going to be an email afterwards where you can download all of the stuff, the audio, the video, the slides, everything that we ever produced here for perpetuity, and keep watching it, okay? So let me start showing the keynote, if I still have it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is one of those things where you have to say, well, you move something away, it doesn't show up anymore, and all of a sudden you're looking for it. This is a very much a live demo. I like that. I'm not perfect. I'm trying out new stuff here too. So, all right. Somehow okay, that's very good. My Keynote has crashed. That's always a good thing to do. But you see what to do. You just keep talking. That's the most important part. And that's what I usually do when I'm on stage and something goes wrong. But if you don't have trouble talking, I guess that would be okay. So let me try this again. And I usually recommend on online shows that you share PDFs rather than Apple Keynote. That's a common issue on Apple Keynote, that it doesn't do the right thing at the right time. I'll move this over here, okay? So, yeah, needless to say, we have already started. So, a great saying by Milton Friedman. I use this in my new film that I launched today that you may have seen on the intro screen. It's about the Great Transformation. Milton Friedman is a sort of a Republican economist, which I wouldn't usually quote, but he has a very good quote where he says, "Only a crisis produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken on the ideas that are lying around." Very important point. Right? So I think right now we're going to take action on the ideas that are lying around, and that goes equality, climate change, environment, different energy, solidarity between people. All these ideas are lying around and they're now becoming sort of a mainstream discussion. I think this is actually good, but obviously we're heading into the great transformation. Some people have said in the last couple of weeks we're heading into the Great Depression, like post Great Depression, or of course the financial depression in 2008. I think that's probably true in economic terms, but I think there's many good other things coming from it. And I always say failure to adapt means failure to exist. I mean, we as keynote speakers, that's going to be our job this year to adapt that. But that's pretty much true for everyone. I think there's lots of hope in here. The thing is, of course, about this crisis, I think it does bring out the worst and the best of us in us. So in many ways, you could say if you're an autocrat, or if you're a politician that doesn't know up from down, then it's probably the worst of you that comes out now, as we've seen. But there's many other people who are saying that we have more solidarity, we're talking more to each other, we're appreciating each other more, we're collaborating. Like, this here is a good example. We're actually collaborating now together. We've never done that before because it wasn't required, right? And now we're collaborating. I think that's also true for scientists, for example. You can see how scientists are now globally collaborating to solve the crisis and find a solution. And that's going to be the new normal going forward. Business as usual is ending. I think, if you're in the airline business, yeah, it's ending. It's ended, right? Cruise ships, finished, right? I mean, who's ever going to go voluntarily back on a cruise ship, especially older people, after what we've seen now? And then there's other stuff that's starting, right? The whole debate about how our social system is run, sustainable capitalism. And this, of course, is a big deal, right? Remote everything is here. I call Zoom, the software that we're using for this show here, I call Zoom the new YouTube. Right? It's basically becoming the place that we go to now to do all these things. And now, of course, there's Zoom aperos, Zoom drinking, there's Zoom parties, and what have you. I think people will go back to seeing each other as soon as we can. Right? But still, we're going to have remote everything, and augmented reality, virtual reality will bring all those new options. And technology is now the big winner, right? If you're a tech company, you're winning because everything is tech now, right? And in addition, a lot of people would say, well, we shouldn't restrict the tech companies too much because they're doing all these great things now. So that leads also to a potential surveillance environment that we have to be very careful of, that Noel Harari has talked about in his FT article you may have seen. As a summary of the video that you can see also on YouTube, of course, I think it's very important that we're currently discovering that we actually are human. We need other humans. We have to talk to other humans. We have human needs that the internet doesn't fulfill. And this is a very big thing, I think, for us to think about how that will change our future going forward. I do believe that online events can create a whole new business and a whole new industry that hasn't until now existed. That's going to be in parallel to the human contact. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass back to Antoni now. I've talked long enough, and Antoni, please take it from here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so normally I speak about workplace communication, and I'm a sucker for analog communication. I was almost unwillingly drawn into this when big corporations asked me, what about virtual leadership? What about virtual communication? And I will share some ideas and tips and experiences that I have. But first, I would like to just say hi to Åsa again. Åsa Degermark, she will be part of this. Can you unmute yourself for just a second here, and we can see if we can get you to. Hi, Åsa, how are you?
Hey, Antoni, I'm fine. I'm super fine, actually.
I'm really happy that you're with us, our good friend here, because you are a two-time award winner of producing online conferences. So you're at the right place right now.
Yeah, I'm really happy I can support right now. And it's, you as a consultant, you're always happy to sell both umbrellas and ice cream. So now it's ice cream time, and I get really requests on frustrated companies that really need to transform live physical events into digital events. So I'm really happy to support.
Excellent. We're going to have a chat with you soon. At first, let me share with you a couple of ideas about the pros and cons, the pain and the gain of virtual conferences, virtual meetings, and then go into a couple of a selected few. I know, Gerd, you said that we will give everything people need to know about online conferences. That kind of stretched you too much, but we will give you a couple of good.
Not everything, just
not everything, right? No, but a couple of good ideas and tips here. And I will also end with 3 tips for you if you are a speaker as well. 3 hacks that will help you get across kind of the barrier of the screen. So let me share with you my doodles, my illustrations, my slides. Here we go. Okay. So the first thing is, what about face-to-face or through a screen? Gerd, you are a former musician, am I right?
I have to unmute myself first. Yes, I am. I'm still a musician, but just no longer on stage.
All right, fine. So you're a musician. Would you think that we, if we had a chance to, would rather see you live on stage in the same room or through a YouTube clip or something like that?
I think it depends how pretty you are.
Well, you look good enough. I mean, the whole experience of being there in the same room is so much richer. And I don't think we should kid ourselves. I know that you say that we will have it might be that we will have more meetings like this in the future. I agree, we will have that, and they will look like more and more physical meetings as well. And when we have VR and AR and so forth, but still the experience is two-dimensional. It is not as good. We should just realize that it is a difference between being live or watching it on a screen. And then if you take a phone conference, for instance, that's like listening to your concert when you play on a phone. It's not as good. And what about emails? That would be like somebody's transcribing what notes you're playing. So it gets worse and worse and worse. And I just want us to realize that it is not as good, the actual human experience. But with that said, we have a number of really good advantages as well. So let me go to them now. Advantages. Well, first of all, of course, we save time. Everybody has to travel somehow, get to a place. I mean, I remember going to Dallas, from Sweden to Chicago, Dallas, rented a car, went to the venue, spent 2 hours, and then went back home. I mean, was it worth it? Perhaps, from a human experience perspective. But I don't know if that is the efficiency gain that we have. So that's one thing. If we're going to move on then, what else do we save? We save money, of course, on planes and trains and accommodation, food, and all that sort of stuff. So it's also a good thing when it comes to this. These are all efficiency issues, of course. And really, you can even spend some money on us as keynote speakers or MCs, because if I have to travel and be away for 3 or 4 days, I naturally need to charge more than if I am working locally, of course. So if I'm sitting by my office desk, I don't necessarily have to charge as much. I mean, the value, the content is the same, but it's a timing issue as well that comes into play. So perhaps you can have 2 keynote speakers instead of 1, or 3 instead of 2, for instance, while working with this media. I haven't cleared this with Gerd, so perhaps you have another opinion on this one, but I think it's a good thing to consider at least. What else? Of course, I mean, the CO2, you save a lot on that as well. Not completely. I mean, it's not like this is zero, because you still have 1,000 machines up and running and requiring electricity and all that. But still, you do save some things there as well. Also, you can bring in, an expert if you want to, that cannot travel to you for a half-hour panel discussion, but they can always be online with you. So if you have a hybrid conference, for instance, this is a good way of just bringing in someone for a short while and then leave them be. And finally, and this is a new one that I did not think about when I wrote the book about virtual meetings, you don't infect people when you're not in the same room. So this is another advantage that just showed up, you can say. All right, so those were some of the advantages. I mean, they are pretty significant, really. So you can do a lot of things with just saving the planet, if you will, and also be efficient at the same time. Let's go into a couple of experiences, ideas, tips that I've got and gathered also from other thought leaders around the world when it comes to online conferences. One of them is that you should not be sloppy just because it's a virtual conference instead of a physical one. So this one is so important, that you still have set a goal for the conference, that you still have a purpose for the conference. I mean, when I'm hired by an organizer to be an MC or a keynote speaker, I always ask the same question. So why do you have this event? And you would be surprised how many come back with one answer. Well, we usually have one in April. And I think tradition is really good, but that cannot be the only thing. We need to have a better purpose than only tradition. So that's the one thing that this is the same for a physical meeting as it is for an online meeting. It's the same thing. Now, you just saw my next advice here, and that is to use the possibilities that we have now on this medium that actually in one sense brings us even closer. I mean, you can use the Q&A function, you can use the chat, you can use a polling, you can use all sorts of things that make the interaction even greater. So we can feel that we're almost closer to the keynote speaker, for instance. We're not closer to our audience members. We cannot have this social gathering, the networking in the coffee breaks and so on. That's a lack we have. But we can be closer to the actual keynote speaker. So use every opportunity you can. And I know that we won't go to breakout sessions this time, but we will have some polling at the very end, so you get a feel for that as well. The next one is to keep your meetings shorter. The concentration level that you have in your brain is diminishing when you work in a virtual environment. And we have not been going on for very long. And I can tell you, some of you have already checked your email at least once, even though I'm right now trying to pour out my heart and soul to you. So keep the meetings shorter. For instance, this Monday, a few days ago, I was supposed to have a one-day workshop on storytelling for a group. That obviously didn't happen on site. But instead, we had one session in the morning and one session in the afternoon, so that we covered both time zones. And those were 90 minutes instead of those 6-8 hours that we were supposed to work. So keep the meetings shorter. It's a really good advice. The next one, use a moderator. I am surprised how many people forget the MC role and the moderator, as we have here with Soha. There's two different roles also in this virtual environment. One is to kind of lead the process, just like any ordinary moderator. So when I have that role, I mean, it's about creating an atmosphere, introducing the speaker, asking the right questions, having a panel discussion. But it's also keeping track of the chat, keeping track of the Q&A, keeping track of everything like that. And it's so great to remember that you might need not only one, but two. The money you save from not traveling and having accommodation and so forth, use some of that back into having a good moderator or two, perhaps, creating a good technical environment as well, perhaps with a studio and so on. So use a moderator as well. Thank you, Soha, for being here with us. And then, of course, adapt to time zones. If this is a global event, somehow adapt to time zones. I saw that Steve, Thomas, Andrew, you come from the US. This is the time that works for you. I don't think we have that many people from Asia right now because it's in the middle of the night for them. So again, time zone things are important to look at. And perhaps an event like this should be twofold, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, if you want to cover all time zones, so to say. Those were my quick kind of scratching on the surface advice. There are like 100 more. But then I will give you three more advices when you are the presenter. Concrete for you. First one, look up. Don't look at the screen, look at the web camera so it feels like we have an interaction, an eye contact with each other. If I would have looked like this when I speak with you, because that's where my screen is, you won't get the same feeling. So start looking at the camera, just like a program leader on TV. And also, don't look down, which means that if you have a laptop that looks down, it's like me being up here and trying to kind of look down on you, doesn't feel good. So try to lift the whole camera up to eye level. Also good advice. And finally, my last advice, act out. I cannot move on the stage now. I cannot be, walking towards one end of the room and then to another and then out perhaps to the audience. All I have is this and perhaps two hands. That's it. So give your everything when it comes to emotions and clarity and energy into that session. So those were my advice, my tips and tricks and hacks. And now I think it's time to, that's the book. It's also in English and called Virtual Meeting, very uncreative. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Here we go.
All right.
And let's see if we can look at if there are some Q&As here that we can cover before we go into Åsa's section.
Actually, I have a comment on this. I think we have lots of interesting questions here. Just to remind the audience out there, you can go to the questions, you can look at the questions. If you like a question, you can upvote using the up button, so that we know which ones are good, right? You can also use the chat, Soha is monitoring the chat. Don't send me WhatsApp messages, please, however, right? Okay, one thing I want to say for sure is I think that, having a real contact with real people next to each other, drinking the coffee, doing the drinking, and all these things that happen at conferences. I mean, let's be sure that speakers are not the most important thing about conferences. It's the mingling, right, and all that stuff. So what we do online is completely different. It has its own value, and it's kind of like you go to a music show or you watch the YouTube stream, right? They're different values, and I think they can perfectly exist with each other, but they're not competing with each other. And this is what we're trying to figure out, right? What is the unique value of such an event like this? And I think I'm totally with you, Antoni, on this. It has to be precise. It's not the big stuff on big stage. If you want to see me on stage, you can go to YouTube, right? You don't have to come to a webinar for that. So, Antoni, any feedback on that, or?
One thing that I think is really interesting is that, how it was with the old, when we had the smartphones coming in and we tried to take a web page right into the smartphone and we couldn't see anything because the size was so small. We needed to make them responsive. I think we should think exactly the same when it comes to online conferences compared to physical conferences. We cannot just move the whole thing into an online world. That would be stupid. Let's use the functionalities we have. Let's understand that we cannot meet over coffee, but we can do something else.
Yeah, it reminds me of the first magazines that went online, like fashion magazines. They were just printing a PDF from their magazine, right? And needless to say, it didn't work, right? So can you put us on the gallery view so we can have there we go, have a more proactive conversation. Great. So let's take on the first question, shall we? I mean, we have a clear upvote here by Steve Compold. Thank you, Steve, for contributing for this. The question by Steve is, what are the KPIs for an online event? What has been the biggest conference today and what are we aware of? What is the KPI for an online event? Antoni, Åsa?
I think I would like Åsa to answer that question. Åsa, what do you say?
Well, I think, first of all, we normally measure it on numbers of attendees. I think we should move on to measure how long the audience stay in a digital event, because that is really getting to you if your agenda is good enough to make the audience stay. And then I also think this satisfaction index from a consumer point of view is still valid, but then you need to ask other things. Were you able to interact with the speakers? Were your digital experience good and something like that. So number of visitors is not valid anymore, I would say. Rather, the digital experience, that's really what interests us.
Yeah, I tend to agree on this. I think the experience part is crucial. And this is, of course, why we're doing these kind of events, right? Because I think the experience can be completely different, right? Online. Because, for example, I'm not physically capable to give everybody in the room a PDF, you know, when I'm on the stage speaking. But online, yeah, I can do that. I can give you a gift of, and in fact, Soa has a gift for you that you could pull into the chat, right? We could do all those things, and that's really different. I think the KPI, yeah, okay. Months ago, I wrote an article in Forbes magazine. I said we should replace KPI with KHI, the Key Human Index. You know, we should ask what is actually happening for us in this event, right? Do we have a penny drop moment? Do we have an experience? Do we find out something new, right? And we have to really think of this a little bit differently in terms of measurement. You know, when you go to a real conference, lots of people leave the room in a boring speech and get coffee, and then you can see them. But here, you know, you see the count on participants shrinking, then you know there's something that's not quite there, you know. They haven't kept people's attention and stuff. But I mean, let's be fair, the distraction is huge on an online event, right? There's coffee coming, there's your cat running around, your wife is waving from the balcony, and your WhatsApp is going off, right? So yeah, that's...
Well, the distraction is pretty huge as well, because if you're by your screen, that means that you're by default, or
right.
you know, very on your fingertips, you have your emails, you have your Facebook, you have your Instagram. All of those things compete with your attention in this case. That's why it's important to keep them short, I think. And also one of the questions, at least one of the questions was about that. Is it possible to carry out a day-long conference online? Well, you know, it's going to be tough, very tough for the audience. They will probably go in and out in that case, you know. But I see that as a really challenging situation.
Also has another opinion on this.
Yeah.
How about, sorry.
I don't think you can make a one-day conference online. I think you can do maximum 2 or 3 hours, but you can do breakout sessions after that, because the human brain do not manage to sit one day behind the screen. There's no one that can make that attractive content actually for a whole day. So I would say no on that one, but 2-3 hours is maximum if you have really super content, but then you can do breakouts for more deep dives, and that's fine.
And I love to do breakouts also in a keynote, just, you know, make the breakout 2-3 people, talk about this subject, come back in, and then we go on. And that creates also some sort of interaction that I really love. And the audience so far that I tried it on is really happy with that as well.
And
I think also
the other thing is the question of whether people know each other, they have existing relationships, right? Then you can do different things. For example, you know, you can take a yoga class online with 30 other people from the yoga studio that you've previously met, and people are fine with doing that. They know each other, they chat, and they know each other. So you can do a session with the top level management, the top 30 people in the company that have previously met in real time. You can probably do that all day if you organize it correctly. But a huge conference, you know, pertains to the next question, large IT conferences and stuff, I think those are going to shrink. They're going to happen more often. They're going to happen in time zones. And when people can go back, they will go back. But think about this for a second. You know, I do a lot of those large shows. And, you know, when I go to Las Vegas to do a speaking gig at the what's not the Mondrian, the whatever it is, big venue, right? I'm sure the production alone is probably $500,000, you know? Just the production.
I work with a company right now, actually, that they're now moving from, you know, a traditional 2-day techie conference that is tradition, but now they have realized they can't do 2 days. So now they are splitting it up into one mini conference per month instead. And I think that's the way to go. Meeting more often, and, you know, make your content into portions and meet more often. And that's really the opportunity here.
That's one of the reasons I talk about, you know, being responsive, like you in a mobile app. You do the same thing here. You just bring it into the virtual environment where you need to do other things than what you do in a normal 2-day conference, for instance.
Yeah, I read the other day that Microsoft is doing 350 events or so a year, right? And will they continue to do that? That's highly unlikely for so many reasons, including airline disasters in terms of bankruptcies and so on, right? Including mandatory travel health check. You know, when you go to the airport, you go to China, you're going to have to go through that. Think about the jam that you're going to have there at security, right? And then all of the carbon taxes that are coming for flying, right? So yeah, I mean, this isn't coming back. It's coming back in a different way. And we're always going to value meeting each other. But we're going to take the train. We're going to do it more locally. I think there's going to be a lot more local events where we take the train, or we can easily go to, rather than flying to China to meet people from Dell or whatever, right? Yeah, so it's going to be one of those mix. I often say it's a little bit like dating, you know. I mean, I'm too old to use Tinder, but just as a comparison, right? When you date on Tinder, parenthesis, right? That's one way of dating. Probably gets you to results, you know, that you want to achieve. And then there's another way of dating, which is between people, you know, at events, friends, and so on. Are they mutually exclusive? Probably not. Do they have their own purpose? I would say so, yeah. I can't really say because I haven't tried, but my assumption is they do have purpose, right? Lots of people are doing it. But they're not actually killing each other, right? People are still doing both. And people are still going to concerts and listen to Spotify. So I think that's how it's going to go. The hard part will be for companies in the next 2 or 3 years, budget, right? They're going to cut budget.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at large global corporations, then you probably see much more of hybrid meetings as well, where they have hubs where they meet, and then they kind of join together anyway, instead of everyone travel to one place. But you know what? I would like to Åsa to come in here. I have a couple of questions for you, Åsa, and how about we go through them and see what we can, and then we take the rest of the questions afterwards. Yeah, I already told you that you kind of this award-winning producer of online conferences. So what is the one thing we should avoid? We've talked about it a little bit, but you know, what should we not do?
PowerPoint. PowerPoint you should not do.
Both me and Gerd just used PowerPoint. Didn't you see that?
I'm gonna.
What are you talking about? That's my life.
No, I think PowerPoints are really relevant in smaller meetings. In this case, it was perfectly fine with illustrations to make it a little bit more pedagogic, etc. But if you do more TV broadcasting productions like you do in large corporations and you do in conferences like that, PowerPoints really kill the digital experience. You have so many more assets you can use, storytelling, you can use graphics, you can use basically anything to support your story with. So I think PowerPoint belong in smaller meetings, fine. In larger meetings, no. Because if you use PowerPoint, you lose attention from the speaker. And when you have cameras and TV productions, you really want the highlight to be on the speaker. And I also think you want to move away from that stage thinking. I mean, I think the biggest mistake you can do is to really, you know, put a speaker with PowerPoints and that put a camera in the back, because that is not what I consider as a digital conference. That's more of a webcast where you record a stage speaker, and that's something different.
But then again,
so give us some advice.
You can use this, right? No PowerPoint, you just change the background.
Yeah.
Now I'm in San Francisco, and that's also a statement, right? Yeah. And you can use this great app. It's called Manycam, and Manycam allows you to actually bring in content in different ways into your camera feed. It's a bit much in terms of using it at the same time, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you could see this kind of thing. I can just change my background like this, and then you will get sort of a video feed there as well, right? You could say, but of course I'm still in it, right? By the way, before we move on, I forgot one thing, you know, in all of that discussion, and that is that we wanted to have a poll as to who you are. I think that would still be useful. Do you still want to do that? Yeah, Antoni? Also? Go
ahead.
Yeah,
sure.
We'll do the poll now, and then we'll go. Okay, so I'm going to launch the poll. That's the first one. Is what is your prior experience? And the poll should pop up on your screen now. Here you, I think, only get one possible answer. So please, all of you, just hit the poll there. You can find on the iPhone, it's on the top right, on the iPad also. We just want to know who you are, so we can see what your expert level is. You know, I did another event yesterday where it was really interesting to see that most people had trouble even finding the toolbar for Zoom, right? Because they had never actually used the software that has several windows like this, right? So, yeah, interesting to see. Most of you, 53%. I think we're gonna make the poll available for downloading as well. We'll taking a nice screenshot from this, but it seems like most people have experience with Zoom. 50% of people have experience with Zoom. And some experience at 26%. Yeah, there's one person that's overwhelmed. Yeah, I'm with you on this one. Believe me, it's a learning curve, right? It's a steep learning curve how to figure out how this works. Let me take a screenshot, and I think we can just move on here, right? I think has everybody voted? I think we have, yeah, pretty much. So I'm going to share. I think I can share this as well. Can we? I think we can. Here, share results. You can take a look at the results. So, by the way, we're using Zoom because we like Zoom. You know, we're talking to Zoom about working together, but right now this is just we like Zoom, and I've tried everything else, and there are some other good ones, but this is why we have Zoom. So, back to Antoni.
Well, in that case, back to Åsa. Give us your top tips now of how to run a larger online conference. I talked more about the smaller ones, the webinars and the seminars. So just go on.
Before I do that, I really would like to tell my story, how it all started, because I think was really driven by a need. It actually started already in 2015. I worked for a very large corporation with their R&D spread out in 43 countries around the world. And we could only afford to fly in 700 of these to this, yearly conference where we had some dining and nice entertainment and stuff. And they all flew back home. But the strategy didn't improve. We didn't get all those R&D people to walk in the same direction. We had a problem. So we realized we need to reach more people in this huge organization. So we decided to go digital. And that's where we actually started to develop this format. So what happened is that we managed to connect 5,000 leaders from this organization in the same live broadcast, listening to the same content. 8 sites were part of the actual broadcast, delivering content, and we said hi to so many people during this conference, and this became the tradition instead. So that was really the beginning, how we had a problem that we needed to solve. And since then, we have done a lot. So I really learned throughout the way in developing these things. But my 5 hot ones, I'm going to get you. And now I need to really act upon your advice, Antoni, here. But my 5 advice are: make sure you produce the agenda with the digital audience in mind. Some of that has already been said. It needs to be short session. It needs to be dynamics. It needs to be a variety of pre-recordings, live speakers, different sceneries with sofa seating, with interviews. It could be a presenter. It could be something else, animations, whatever. You need to attract the audience all through, because if not, they will leave in 10 minutes or start to look at the social media, of course. So. Second, I think it's really important to pretty fast create a sense of belonging in a conference. When you enter a room, you realize, or immediately you belong to that conference, you belong to that room. You have to create this in a digital room by doing interaction. And you can do interaction in many ways. Some of them have already been said here. We have excellent chat functions here, Q&A, that can also be used. You can have an expert panel in the back, answering questions all the time, and the moderator can move to the expert panel. You can have Mentimeters. You can have, there's tons of different activity tools. So you can have live links to different sites. So you can actually connect with people live and say, hey guys, how are you? And they can also share some content. So interactivity, I think, is extremely important for the user experience. Thirdly, I think we should really utilize the technology that is available digitally. That means in a live conference, use green screens, VR, AR, graphics. Maybe the keynote speaker is in holograms. There are so many technologies here we can use. So, the user experience, that's really the value we can add by using these different things. And I've tried many of them, and it's really an awesome experience if you try to get those into a very dynamic agenda. When it's come to the content, you really have to be to the point and carve out the key message. Longer sentences, explanations, things like that really make the audience bored. So you need to be really spot on with your key message. So it's a content work that is really in the back of a good show. And my fifth advice, it's really based on experience, because when we did these 3-hour conferences in the beginning, we realized that human brains are, like I said, are not really used to look at a small laptop screen for 3 hours, or even worse, if you're consuming it in your mobile. So what we did then, we started to take the hubs, as you mentioned, Antoni, the hubs where people actually were one or more people in the same site. So we urged them to consume the digital conference in the same room. And that really made a big difference, because you get engagement locally, and you get people much more, you get their attention if they are several people. They can also discuss things in the room. You can raise questions, they can discuss together. So I would say a digital meeting can never replace a physical meeting. But if you consume the conference together and you have interaction, you can actually come pretty far, when it's come to this human side of it. So that was my 5 ones.
Perfect. Can you give us one more when it comes to speaker? I had mine when it comes to these speakers, how they can act. What about from a conference perspective? Any advice on speakers?
Yes, I think it's extremely important with a mix of speakers, not only top management, because top management, most of the times they are just, talking about the high-flying things, strategies, things like that. I think the content needs to be so crisp and so interesting so the audience stay, which means that you need a mix of speakers. You need the expert in there as well. You need some specialist, or maybe you need an external keynote who can share another perspective. So I think a good mix of level, but also knowledge, will really provide insights and more of a knowledge sharing to the audience. And I think that's really, really important for a good agenda.
But do you see that as a difference between a virtual or a physical conference?
I would say
sounds like the same.
I would say it goes for all conferences.
Yeah.
I think I totally agree with you on that.
If you see what you can do in a digital conference, for example, you can't in a physical conference talk to everyone in the room, but here you can do that with a chat.
Yeah.
That could also be a great disadvantage depending on what you're saying, of course, right? But you can cross communicate and you can share assets, and this is why, for example, right now we have Sarah Crow. Is this Sheryl Crow's sister? No, just kidding. Sarah Crow is there. She raised her hand, and we're going to bring her into the call right now. Okay, Sarah, let's bring you in if you have video. And this is the kind of stuff you can do. I mean, it's impossible for a panelist stage to bring in somebody from the middle of the audience like this or as quickly. So let's see if Sarah is there, can actually give us her question, audio and video, if you can. Sarah, you're on.
Great. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can.
And that's one of the worst things you can do in a video conference, of course, is to say, can you hear me? But I'm curious to know your thoughts on security, the security issues. There's a lot of media on that at the moment, particularly when I'm with UNICEF, with the UN, and we're always concerned about, the Security Council meetings, or if it's a Davos style, the spring meetings. To what extent can you, I know you can close meetings, and that's one function I'm aware of, but also while I've got you and 3 of you are keynote speakers, how can you do it in such a way that the keynote speakers become performative? Antoni, you spoke about, having head and shoulder shots, but how can you do it in a much more performative TED type approach?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. And of course, that's several questions. But one thing I'm working on to make it more interactive is I'm not going to actually sit in the future. I'm going to be back there. I need a better setup. I'm going to be walking around in the virtual room that you see behind me, like I would on stage. And in fact, if Antoni has the same background, we could be kind of in the same room, right? And I think all these things those are more technical, where you have to be more of a geek to figure this out, right? But it's coming. I think that is a great solution. There was another question earlier about telepresence, right? I think that telepresence has always been pretty cool, but too expensive, and the price will just go down and down, down until in the very near future, we can be virtually next to each other and much more interactive than we are currently in the sort of post-Skype generation, even using Zoom.
I'd like to add one thing there also. build on that. Now I'm sitting at in my office. So that's why I have this type of neutral background, me in front of my webcam. But what we're talking about here now, Sarah, I think is more of the building up a studio, which I think you can rent it or you can build it. It doesn't cost so much if you compare to the price of just bringing everybody to the same place. So there are a number of studios out there already. More will be built. Gerd will build one himself. And I would suggest that we use some of that when it comes to those more the bigger conferences, the larger conferences, so that we have good quality, high definition, 4K, standing up, moving around, 2 cameras, 3 cameras, work on that kind of setup. That will be really neat to do, and it will work beautifully, I think, as long as the technology works. When it comes to security, I'm not your guy. I don't know anything about that, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think
I can fill in when it comes to security.
Okay, good.
When you do corporate conferences, you need to be on a secure line, so to say. Otherwise, you have industry espionage right away. So in that sense, you have to work with a technical platform that allows you to have a gate to your conference. So you have a password or something to come in. I think that's really what corporates requires. I mean, Zoom is a cloud-based tool. So a corporate would most likely not use Zoom for a conference where you talk about internal secrets, so to say. So there are different levels, and there are for sure the first question you get from corporates when they're going to do this. What about security? Can someone else see my conference? So I think the question is extremely valid.
Yeah, I think right now there's a lot of money flowing into the whole discussion about what can happen in terms of technology with this. I mean, if you looked at the business case for augmented reality, virtual reality, holograms, that's all like exploding now, right? So every investor is going to pull out of oil because oil is finished, right? And they're going to pull out of a whole bunch of other things like airlines, and they're going to put their money back here because this makes a lot of sense, right? We're going to have a huge boom in development and also in infrastructure. And this is where security comes in, right? I mean, what we're doing here doesn't require security. And I think Zoom is a system that's primarily based for more or less open conversations. But you can bet that in the very near future, lots and lots of, like Microsoft Teams, for example, and many other ones, right? They're going to be putting industrial grade security on all these things. And they're already working on that. I think it will require a lot of infrastructure building. And I think this is why people pick different platforms. So you want to be not secure at all. You go to Crowdcast, right? A little bit secure. You can use Vimeo or Zoom, or totally secure. Maybe it's Microsoft Teams. I don't know, or WebEx for that matter, right? So we'll see about that. But I think this will actually shake out pretty well. Right now, it's hard to imagine because what we're doing here, anybody could download, cut it up in pieces, and dish it up on some other network, right? And this is kind of that's how we're doing things. You have any other comments? Otherwise, I think we should take another hand and then look at the questions. Yeah. So there's Simon Torrance. Simon is also a member of the Futures Agency. Thanks for joining us, Simon. And Sawa will pipe you into the feed now. If you have video, then we can also see your video. And just tell us briefly where you're calling from and how you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Gerd. Really good to speak to you. I don't know how to activate my video because so I'm just sort of speaking by audio.
Okay.
I can't see how to do that, but for the video. But my question is, for commercial conference organizers, where they get maybe half their revenue from sponsors and half from selling delegate tickets, how could they rethink their commercial model in doing virtual events?
Åsa?
Wow. Well, I think the organizers really need to turn the thinking upside down. They need to change the business model totally. And I think maybe you don't need sponsors in that sense in the same amount. Maybe you need sponsors to set up the links, but the cost is so low with the digital conferences. It might be the speaker's cost and then the moderator's cost, but otherwise you don't have these costs for facilities and mingling food and drinks, etc. So there's a totally different cost model here. So I would say I think I will see in the future digital conferences a really attractive agenda, and I pay an entry fee which is quite low, and because what you can do in the digital world, you can get so many more people to join your conference. So it's a totally different model. You don't need to fill the room to pay the facilities. Here you have a different setup. You can let thousands of people instead of hundreds. So I think the cost model would look very different in the future. Quite low fee to entry a good conference.
Yeah, I think on the cost side, I think if you're looking at the real cost of doing this events in the future, I think we're talking about content, you know, speakers and all that, experience, which is giveaways and goodies and digital things, and technology, which will be more expensive. You know, you want to have good technology, it's not going to be cheap, right? But it will still be 70% cheaper than most live events. Right, so do you need sponsors? Well, maybe your sponsor is going to just cover the speaker and then get a 1 minute slot to show a video or something, right? And we have to be creative about this. I think the money is going in this direction totally, yeah? And that's for so many obvious reasons. And if you're looking at, you know, who usually pays for events, it's marketing budget, it's corporate communications, it's not HR, right? Of course, HR also does events, which is a different cup of tea, more training oriented. So I see many new possibilities there. I think sponsors are also now desperate in finding business cases for reaching people in digital ways. And don't forget that, you know, with all the online stuff that we're doing now, we have archives, right? So, you know, now you can actually watch this conference anytime, and the sponsor is part of that, right? So maybe I think in the future, Zoom and other companies will have virtual rooms. So we're going to go into like a venue. You know, I'm going to be like I am at the Radio City location or something, right? I'm going to be in a venue, and the sponsor can help me design the venue and put up some banners, and, you know, like they do in a real place. And that's all coming right now. We're still in the early stage where we don't have rooms. We only have fake backgrounds. You know? But all that.
But again, I mean, you lose some of the interactivity, of course, when you do that as well, right? If you have that's a YouTube clip, and you're not part of the program anymore. Here you are part of the program. You ask questions, you do some chatting and so forth. That is the richest form of communication we can do right now in the digital way. And so one question was about, what about the YouTube stream right now? Well, anyone who was not in this actual session can still watch it on YouTube. It's still live, but they don't have the same type of interaction, I think, that we have right now in the Zoom calls, let's say.
Yeah, I think on the interaction side, there's many cool new things. The other day I was watching a show by Niels Müller from Trend One in Germany, and they actually had a meeting, not a webinar, and there's a different functionality, but you can basically unlock everybody's microphone at once. And that was pretty cool because you were able to say, okay, now everybody gets to scream yes or scream no, you know, on certain questions. So we can be interactive with sound, yeah? Or we can clap, or we can do other things, you know, sort of on the fly together, right? And also what's really cool in Zoom meetings, for example, rather than Zoom webinars, is that you can have thumbnails of 100 people on a huge screen, right? So everybody can do things and interact that way. I think there will be many such things where we can say, well, you know, once we get hip to the technology, you know, for example, I can use my iPhone to bring in my room by just holding it up and filming what's behind me, also using the external camera, right? Or a Twitter feed and all these kind of things. These are all things to be experimented.
I think it's our imagination that is the limitation right now. Technology is there. It's all there. It's just what we can imagine. And it's like you said, Gerd, before, it's a transformation and people's habits of being in physical events. And now we need to use people to move on and get used to other things. And maybe we need to move slow because of the ability to adapt to new things. But I know that my brain is the limitation when I do events like this. The technology is really there.
Well, right now, we're not moving very slowly. I mean, we're just not only dipping our foot into the pool, we're right into it. And I can see, you know, massive change going on right now. But I also think that we do want to sit around the campfire talking to each other also in the future. So my bet is on hybrid events, actually. I think that would be really interesting to see in the future.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you have 30 really important people in a network, like 30 CIOs, you know, CTOs globally. Like, could they be meeting once a month because they know each other using this? That would be fantastic, right? To catch up. I mean, the other day we had a meeting with people having a drink in the evening together and chatting about how we were doing and all that stuff, you know? That wouldn't have happened before. And then when you have this meeting, then eventually you have a real meeting. Everybody says, "Oh, that was pretty cool," your background or whatever, right? You actually get together, and it enforces the network, right? And I think it makes us more human if we do this, if we don't forego the other experience. And business models, business models. I mean, that's a tough question, right? We're trying to figure out the business model here because we're not selling this show. But as speakers, I think we want to encourage agencies. There's many speaker agencies on this call, I think, on this conference. We want to encourage agencies and clients to try this. Right? I mean,
and also to come back to what Åsa said before, keep it shorter. I think I mentioned that as well. Keep it shorter and keep it more crisp. It's still a matter of bringing in subject matter experts and then, deliver so that it comes across, through the screen and through the lens, so to say. So the content is still there. It still has to be there, and even more crisp and even more perhaps to the point, so that we don't lose out. People just leave otherwise if it's too, boring, so to say. The attention span is really short in a physical meeting, but it's even shorter in the virtual environment.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for us I've done almost 2,000 gigs on big stages. So the hardest thing for us is to shut up and keep it short. It's the hardest thing to say, okay, you have 30 seconds to say what you want to say, right? And then move on. So and you don't get 40 minutes to present. So that's a steep learning curve. We have somebody else in here raising the hand. Then maybe we should go back to the question, right? You guys okay with taking another call? Yeah.
Sure.
On the late night call show somewhere. So Jeffrey, Geoffrey. Okay, great.
My question is, sure. I'm calling you from British Columbia in Canada today. My question is, do you think there will be a difference between how various markets will react to the potential for virtual conferences? And my wondering about this is there's very different reactions globally at the moment to pandemic response. And will that eventually still trickle over into how various markets think about these kinds of events?
Yeah, I think Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And I always say culture eats technology for breakfast. Riffing off Peter Drucker, because it all depends on your culture. Like in Switzerland where I live, it's a very personal culture. People are very, they're very into gadgets and everything, but they want to meet, right? Americans, I think Americans will adopt instantly, and they already have. The Anglo world is much faster on this, but then again, America will probably have a huge crisis for the foreseeable future. But of course, you're coming from Canada, so you could smile about that one. But I think the adoption really is a question of, once it becomes good and normal, then you take the leap. Look what happened. I think 10 or 12 years ago, we had a Nokia Ovi, for downloading music, and you'd have to use a certain copy protection and pay €2, and nobody. I think they sold 100,000 songs, and now you have Spotify. 24 million songs, on the push of a button, everybody's using it. I think it's going to be the same here.
Can I also have to that as well? I think there are different perspectives into this. I think there's one way of the how many laptops you have and how IT mature you are in a country. Maybe you work in a very modern workplace, but it's not the laptops you bring home every day, and it's not that modern in the technology sense. Of course, that is a barrier. The ones who are online now, you have most likely several devices in your homes already. There are parts of the world they're not there yet, so of course we will see differences there. I also think that this more culture thing, if you have done a good job, they allow you to go to a certain conference. It's a gratitude. And you're there, you're mingling, and you feel that it's a celebration for you of you, sort of. Going to a digital conference is not the same status, and I think we will see some changes here. And of course, there are how the normal behavior in certain markets, like you mentioned yourself, how we act now when there is some crisis in the world, we act differently. But I think it's a lot about IT maturity here. how used you are to work with the screen. And I really think that the Crown Princess of Sweden will be the first royal that will be a hologram on the next country visit, because she's really into IT, and she's very, she cares for the environment, and she thinks very sustainable. So I wouldn't be surprised if she will, I'll visit you, but I do it online. And if we just start to see those things, that the visionaries and the front runners in that sense, that can of course help out. But I think there's a lot of perspectives into this.
I think,
Can I add one thing also, Gerd? It's is it a cultural thing? I think it's more of a habit than anything else. And right now, most of us in this audience, at least, we are thrown into this kind of house arrest environment where we have to discover video for the first time, like it was something new. And I think that if we do that more, the more people who will actually be in house arrest, having to collaborate with peers anyway in the smaller everyday meeting like this, then they will be more and more used to also attend perhaps an online conference. So I think that this is actually the first stepping stone into more online conferences, the fact that we have to start collaborating in this type of format as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind, technology is exponential, right? All we do is need to pour some money on it. And what we see now is all this stuff like augmented reality, virtual reality, holograms, telepresence. That was all there, but now we have a real business case, right? So, and of course, it's also deeply disturbing to think about that people will walk around with that virtual reality helmet all day long. I don't know what that's going to do to their brain. But on the other hand, I predicted in my last piece that I wrote about post-corona future. You can find that, by the way, at postcoronafuture.com. I wrote in there that I think in the very near future, I'm going to go to Zurich airport. I'm going to hop into a holographic room that costs $2 million to build. I'm going to hop out in Singapore and give a talk. Right? And the airline will sell me the ticket. Because, that room I can't do here. Right? But this is the kind of stuff that's coming. I'm going to go to the airport to virtually travel. It's hard to imagine for airlines. Of course, I don't like the idea there's no gasoline being burned. But who knows, right? I think this is a huge thing that we're going to see coming. So shall we take another question? I mean, not a hand raise. We'll go back to Ragda in a second. Right now, I think we should take the first question, the top-rated question, right? So here we have Ryan Noik. Thanks for attending. How do you attract a person's attendance to your online event and regain their presence? With live events, once you're in the venue, it's not as easy to just walk away. Yeah, that's for sure. We've lost 30 people. So, yeah, how do you attract attention? Anybody?
I think it's all about the agenda. The agenda needs to be so crisp, so you really are on your full attention all the time and is so interested. And like always, save the best for last or something like that. But it's all about the agenda. I don't think there are any other ways of holding on to digital audience. Otherwise, if you can win money if you stay to the end, and I don't think that will be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can have a famous celebrity if you want to. If you don't have a good agenda, you can at least do that. But I agree with Åsa. Content is king.
Yeah, I think, when you on running up to an event, I'm just sharing the web address here. Running up to the event, it's all about content and schedule and attraction, just like other events have been before. During the event, right, it's about production quality, it's about speed, it's about personality, it's about experience. Those are two different things, right? I think what's going to happen here is that most of these events will be done by companies that already have an audience. They have all their sales managers, they have already all their partners, and now they have to do it here, right? And they have to relearn how that works. For example, you go to many conferences. I mean, I attend so many, it's hard to imagine. And I tell you, I think you have a 6 or 7 hour events, and a lot of that can be utterly boring. Listening to the next guy with the Excel spreadsheet, and that will not happen online, right? Because people will just switch off and check out their Facebook in the meantime, right? It forces us to perform better and to get our act together. And it's funny, how many corporate people do you know that are good on video and good in audio and good at speaking, and I think all of us are going to become in a way sort of online performers now. Most companies that do this, right? Another question, and then we'll take Ragdar's, okay? So, anonymous attendee, can you recommend other software tools for digital conferences? Many other ones. Anybody want to chime in on this? But I have good experience with Crowdcast. I watched an amazing show for Singularity University the other day with 25,000 people online. So if you have very large crowds, you don't need a lot of interactivity. That's not what I want to do, but it worked great. Vimeo Pro, I like quite a bit for the same reason. I love Zoom because the sound quality is usually good, the audio quality is good, the tools are complex, and you can do different things. And I feel kind of comfortable with that now. But I have been investigating, I know pretty much everything. Just yesterday, I found a great website called houseparty.com. Take a look, and this is obviously not for webinars, but it's basically to put the party online between houses, right? So I don't know, take a look at that one. Anyone else? Don't be shy.
I like Zoom, but I really do. I've tried a couple of ones as well. Teams, for instance, the Microsoft Teams is a fantastic collaboration tool, but this part is tricky. This is much easier on Zoom.
Yeah, I think we're going to see so many other options unfolding here. Also, I mean, Zoom can be expensive on the top end, That's going to change I think what's happening now is, of course, everybody's doing this, so it's taking up a lot of bandwidth. And here in Switzerland, we're lucky with the internet, as you are in Sweden, I think. But if you're in a country like Brazil or India, where you already have bandwidth issues, that could be quite unnerving. Do you want to chime in, Åsa, or?
No, I have worked with Zoom and a lot with Teams actually, and I think they're good at two different things. I think Teams is really relevant for your colleagues and your working team, where you need to share documents and you can prioritize tasks and work with Teams Planner, for example. I think that's, if you're a remote leader and you need to manage your team on a daily basis remotely, I think Teams is a good organizer in that sense. But I agree with Antoni that this Zoom is a little bit more, friendly when it's come to the visibility of people and easy to swap. And so I think I think you find your favorite when you know what to use it for.
Yeah, it's a great question here. Great question here on the chat saying, is there a platform that can accommodate 360-degree cameras? I think all that stuff is coming. Again, keep in mind, so far there wasn't much of a business case. Again, Spotify, when Spotify first came around, they said we're going to put music on the cloud. Everybody's like, oh no, nobody will pay, and it's going to sound terrible, right? And then all of a sudden, the iPhone, the cloud, 4G, boom, 120 million subscribers. It's going to be the same here. I think we're going to see a huge boom and lots of possibilities. In fact, I think it may get so good that we get lost as to where we actually are. Are we in a virtual room or are we actually in our real life? I said for a joke sometimes, the thing about virtual rooms is, imagine you're in there all day long, you come home in the evening with your kids and your wife or your husband, and you find it utterly boring because you're not in a virtual room. Right? I mean, it could be sort of the opposite of that. So,
which is perhaps one of the questions we got about gamification, how that can help. And I think absolutely it can help. Anything that kind of triggers dopamine and give us a rush for somehow making us more drawn into the conversation or the presentation is a good thing.
Yeah, let's take another call in here. Ragda Halavani, please tell us where you're from, and if you can do video, otherwise you're just going to be an icon in people's feed.
Hey, I'm Rada Halawani, and I'm joining with my colleagues from Masterpiece, and we are Global Peace Movement, and we are shifting digital also our summits, and we do it in different parts of the world. My question is mainly about the panelists talked a lot about companies that host events and doing it virtually. In our case, it's more that we also work on events that we invite a lot of public. So the part about promotion and reach out to different stakeholders, different change makers, groups that we could reach in the physical world by promoting and going out there and inviting more stakeholders. Now, how can we do the shift online? How can we promote to an event that gets a significant number of attendees while we cannot do it, let's say, in the traditional way of going out and reaching out to these communities on the ground?
Yeah, great question, Rachta. I think this, of course, is the key question that we have to figure out how we do this. I mean, it's kind of like when YouTube first came around, it was easy to get attention. And now everybody's on YouTube. It's very hard to get attention. So I think Zoom and other online platforms will kind of become like this. I tend to think that being unique, being personal, having a leg up, becomes a sort of a big differentiator. You know, what exactly do you stand for? What is happening? What's the style? It's like, you know, why do you watch, say, Hawaii 5.0, you know, 40 years ago versus CSI today? They have their own brands and what they do and how they all hang together. I mean, Netflix has a great example of this. You know, why are shows like Outlander so popular, or as compared to other ones like House of Cards and so on? They all have their own way of doing things. And I think this has to happen also for, you know, I call it the Zoom show now. You know, basically this is the kind of thing that we do now. Everybody has to come up with their own way of finding their format that's attractive, especially if you're an NGO or if you're an organization that depends on user participation and so on. So yeah, that's definitely a good question.
And one thing is for sure, it's not going to be less virtual conferences in the future. So we're going to compete even more in that arena. Not an easy one to answer. I actually would like to ask you tons of questions instead of how you do today. And so, but yeah, it's a tough one.
I mean, how do you get attention when there's so much of it? You know, these days I get like, I don't know, 30 invitations for webinars every day, right? I'm sure you do as well. In the future, this will be just totally normal. It's kind of like, you know, say, watch my YouTube video, but now it's interactive and all this stuff is becoming free, which is, by the way, another thing. I think right now, a lot of things are free. They will not be in the future. So, I mean, we're doing this because we're trying this with you, and we're sort of giving back to the community as well. And that's a good thing. But in the end, of course, our business case is not to be free. And that's, I think, true for a lot of those things that go on right now. So if The Economist does all online events, or TED, or, you know, whoever's doing it now, a lot of business events will not be free, but they will be more democratized in the sense of accessible also on different levels. So I can easily imagine sort of a premium level where you have premium access to certain breakout rooms and other ones don't. Right? And that's, so the business model is going to unfold very much like online music and online television and over-the-top video will unfold as we're doing it.
Perhaps we'll see the same thing as we do in some of the live physical conferences. We have executive roundtables for some specific people. Perhaps you will have the same in a situation like this, where you have dedicated rooms for dedicated people, perhaps paying a premium to talk to the thought leader, for instance. All sorts of things could happen here. It's really exciting, I tell you, even though I would love to be, you know, in your, you know, together with you really, but still it's pretty cool things that's going to happen.
I think it also flattens the hierarchy. You know, I mean, if you look at what used to happen in the old, when I was still on the road, you know, I would go on stage and speak for 40 minutes, and then I would talk to a few people and I would leave. Right? And now it's like all of a sudden we're together on stage, and it's more flat, you know, where we're actually collaborating, communicating, and yeah, everybody has a different style, but it's becoming possible, right? In a real-time format, face-to-face, it's always going to be about, you know, who's the most impressive with their stuff on stage, right? Just like going to a rock concert. And in so many ways, you can say big productions these days for conferences are kind of like rock concerts. Yeah? I used to be a musician. So anyway, Sotiris, we have Sotiris Chatsidakis. Yeah, I know him pretty well. He's from Bucharest. And so I would like you to chime in if you have video.
Hi, Gerd.
Show us your video. Hey, Sotiris.
Good to see you again.
Yes. Good to see your icon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know how to turn it on, to be honest with you.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
So thank you very much for this. This is really informative. I've kept tons of notes here. I want to ask you, our experience, we're running, for Antoni and Åsa, we're running a business club in Bucharest, Romania. We have more than 300 members. And the essence of our existence is that we're offering this physical meeting for people several times a year, right? And then we organize also smaller and bigger events. Gerd has been a speaker for us for a couple of times. And what we did is that we managed 3 weeks ago, as soon as we understood what is happening, we switched completely to online, YouTube first time, and then Zoom, with quite a success, I must say. Many people follow and stuff like that. My question to you is the following. My guess is that after all this home confinement thing ends, we will all go out on the street and start, you know, like, having really missed each other. And I believe that the belonging industry, if we can call it like this, what we do, is going to be on the up and up. That's maybe wishful thinking from my side. Or how much would you see this the whole online thing disrupting the way we meet? Not necessarily the way we visit a site in order to listen to a speaker, but rather the way we come together. And because one of you mentioned that it's a different scenario when you are talking to an audience that knows each other. It's a whole different thing, right? How would you see that being disrupted?
Well, if I start, then also you can take over. For me, this is kind of obvious. If this whole confinement thing goes over, that we can meet each other again. We want to meet again. But what we could do, and what I see some people do right now, some companies do, is that they meet physically, and then they have virtual conferences and meetings in between, and then they meet again. So I would probably say that would be a success formula in the future. I'm also involved in some of those programs, if you will, and that's really interesting, because we started off talking about it as a physical meeting. It's me and 15 CIOs or something like that. Now, of course, we could do that once this shit is over, but then we will go back to having virtual meetings in between. That's what I think, at least.
I agree with you, Antoni. I don't see any other option, and we will use both sides. The digital ones for reaching more people, reaching many, to a lower cost and for sustainable reasons, but our human capabilities, the human part of us still want to meet. And I think that's something we should encourage too, because you do discussions when you meet physically that you probably won't do in the digital meeting room. And you need to also see people's reaction more. You need to spend more time to get to something that you want to. So I think, I don't think the physical meetings will be 100% replaced, but more hybrids for different reasons.
Another thing that I found interesting is to work with what we can call flipped classroom, where you have knowledge sharing offline, so to say, when you're not together. And then you have the rest of the meeting when you are together, and that's when you kind of share your collective intelligence. So I think we will see more of that as well. Perhaps me or Gerd or Åsa will show you a video first, and that's part of the meeting, but it's not at the meeting. So you kind of, it's part of the whole timeline, so to say. Do that first. It will take you 15 minutes, then come into the meeting, and then we have a discussion together. So this kind of whole idea about flipped classroom is probably really interesting in this scenario as well.
I think there's really two things about this. First is when technology becomes so easy and so ingrained, it becomes a habit, okay? And WhatsApp has become a habit for many people. Like even our relatives sending us voice messages now, 70-year-old people talking into WhatsApp. So it has become a global thing. And I think once technology becomes such a habit that we don't even think about it anymore, we can, of course we do this, right? It's going to continue, right? And people will say, if it worked back then, why would it not work now? And it will have its own purpose, right? And so I think that is definitely going to be habit changing, okay? And second, let's not pretend that we're going back to normal ever after this crisis in terms of, okay, what are we going to pay for airlines if they even continue to exist, right? Many of them will go bankrupt. Yeah, how are we going to go to the airport to all the health checks, right? How are we going to deal with the financial depression that is certain to follow a 30% decline of GDP, right? And these are all not very nice things, but I think other things will come out of it. The reality is we're going to be more picky about where we go. We're going to be more appreciative. We're going to be more local, which is good for user theories, I think, right there, because people are there, generally speaking. But I think in general, they will be sort of in parallel, those things. And when online conferencing, Zooming, or whatever you want to call it, becomes the new normal, people will say, yeah, of course we do it, and it works, right? They will continue. I'm certain of that. Once we can go back to actually meeting, maybe we're going to meet with smaller groups. That would also be nice, right? So that we don't always have to have 3,000 people. We can go 200 people. Shall we take a question?
I like the comment from Bert Collett here. He said, "I'm missing functions, applause, emotions, thumbs up, etc." I really like that comment, because I think in tools and digital conferences, you have to plan interaction, but it would be great if more tools have this more spontaneous interaction in terms of showing feelings with hearts coming up or what it can be. I think that would be a very human touch to it. I like that comment.
Very good. Then in that sense, let's do another poll. At least we have some interactivity there. And I think that's also part of the tools where you can, well, it's not actually, it's in the meeting tool where you can applaud and those kind of things. So I'm going to launch this poll. This is a poll about tell us who you are, please, in terms of your background. I should have done that in the beginning, but you know, better late than never. And I think you have multiple choice here now. So you can tell us who you are. That would be good to know. Event organizers and that sort of thing. Again, we're going to publish the whole thing on my blog, futurewithgerd.com. If you go to the blog part tonight, you'll see the MP4, the audio, the video, the slides, and the whole thing. We'll put that up later today. And of course, we have a new website, theconference.digital, where we're going to put all that stuff to get your feedback on what exactly that means and which way we can go with this. So we have about 27% for a company that's looking to go and do this. We have 26% that are looking for solutions for their own business. We have event organizers, 25%, and a speaker agency, 13%, or a keynote speaker themselves. Very good. I think we can just keep on voting on this a little bit. I'll keep this running. We'll share the result later, right, on the website. Probably good enough. Let's take one of the other questions. Right? How many participants? Right now, there's 86 live. 270 signed up. This is actually a very good rate. We have about 40% dropout from signing up. So
about 40% dropout since we started as well. Because, but it's kind of running a bit late, perhaps, for some people. So that might.
Actually, this number is very good. From all the things I've done, we started with about 140, 130. Now we're at 86. That's quite good an hour into the show. I mean, we're going on for a long time here now, right? And actually, we're going to wrap up soon. So, as a reminder, but I think those numbers are actually pretty good. Thanks for the poll, and I'm going to end the poll. Or maybe I'll just show it real quick because I might as well share that with people. Okay, take a screenshot as well. So it's interesting to see that it's a good mix of people. Shall we take Sarah? So we're not going to take another question from you because time is fleeting unless the panelists want to. Shall we take some of the other questions here and then go towards wrap up? Yeah, in a few minutes. Oh, before I forget it, we are going to do another poll at the end to get your feedback. But we have also a bunch of new shows coming up. I have one next week with Ross Dawson and Shara Evans, also from the Futures Agency, two really well-known futurists. And we're going to do this in Australia and New Zealand timing, so 8 a.m. here. That's next Thursday, 8 a.m. here in Europe. And you can find it out on the website, theconference.digital. So let's take another question here. Which one do you want to take? One of you want to pick the question? Yeah, Antoni, pick a question.
There are tons of them. I'm just skimming through them now.
There's a few ones that I uploaded that have been upvoted. How about the virtual world? That's kind of interesting, but okay, I like this one, right? Should event companies become data companies, software developers to gain competitive edge? I like that question. And Antoni, you should pick the next one, please. But you know what's happening is basically, I think we're all going to do a lot more tech stuff, right? Because getting familiar with the tools is going to be crucial. Like, you know, here in the Futures Agency, we have like 50 speakers that we're working with around the world. And I can tell you every single speaker is struggling with understanding how that stuff all works, because in a way we are becoming sort of producers and hosts. Like, you know, my job is not to host conferences online. My job is somewhere else, right? But tech is going to be everywhere. right? So if you're an event organizer, you're going to be in tech. You know, there's no doubt about that. That's my view. Anthony?
Okay, one question here. Do you think, it's from JP Corey, do you think opening up for networking at the end could be interesting? Hopin has this feature, for example. Yeah, I mean, some of those webinar sessions can start off already before we start the whole show, so to say, with some sort of interaction. So you can start off already then with chatting and so forth. Is it valuable to have, what is it now, 79 video sessions going on here at the end? Too many. So that's why we have a function like chat. It's not the best one, but it's better than nothing, so to say. But it's an interesting idea. You know, the session is closed. Anyone who would like to stay for an extra cyber coffee, fine, let's do that.
But of course,
it's hard if it's a big audience, so to say.
You can do that yourself, of course. I would suggest that we're going to do the final poll, and then all three of us get 40 seconds for a final word. Yeah. And also, please, in your final comment for the other participants, do mention where people can find out more about yourself and your own work, just in case. And I think Soa is cutting and pasting some links right now. So the final poll is really, it's going to be, how would you summarize your experience? And this is anonymous, except for, of course, Google and Facebook is tracking everything that we do. But otherwise, it's anonymous. And you have multiple choice here as well, okay? So how would you summarize your experience on this? And again, apologies that we've gone way over time here as we're supposed to. But, you know, these days.
That's a good sign, I think. It's an excellent sign that we have good.
Yeah.
But didn't I say keep it short in my, my messages?
Yeah, well, no. It's funny, you know, I always say that when we joke about the work that we do, I always say that changes for the clients. You know, we ourselves don't want to change. it's the clients that are supposed to change. And this is kind of true. Like we want to keep it all, you know, short, but then we don't do it ourselves. It's really it's a habit thing, right? So we've got some good votes here. I'd love to hear about the sound, the video. This is really crucial. I believe in the future. I mean, I have a 1 gigabyte line at home, so I'm okay with the internet. But generally, the internet is really congested right now. It's causing huge amounts of issues about people fluttering, but I'm usually quite positive about the quality here. So yeah, we have good feedback. We have a lot to learn. Yeah, we have a lot to learn. You can say that again. Technical challenges? Nobody. That's good. Well, you guys are way ahead. Nobody had technical challenges. Okay, maybe I should do my own poll and say I did have technical challenges. But okay, keep on voting, please. We're gonna keep this vote for a little bit longer, and why don't we just keep the vote up, and then we'll do our final comments, and then I'll publish the results. Okay, who wants to go first with the final comments?
I think I can follow up on a question here from Anastasia. She said she's a public speaker, and I don't have any answer to her question, but I think public speakers now have a challenge now, being requested to do their speeches, their keynotes online instead. And of course, it's a question of training here as well. So I really encourage you as a speaker to really take on really proper camera training and learn how to come through in the camera and work with your content, because it's a total different thing. So I really encourage you to invest the time in that.
Great, thank you. Anthony?
Well, you know, I'm so grateful that I have spent a lot of time in front of the camera, and also written that book about virtual meetings. I had no idea that I would spend so massive amount of time on that one as well. You know, sharing is caring. This is what I believe. I'm on LinkedIn. If you see my name and you spell it right, add me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to let us all join the family and learn together. And also my website you will have there as well, antonilacinai.com. It's been great being with you. I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer all questions. So many things popping up, but thank you so much.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to wrap it up by saying I think, you know, the human brain is wired for 3 things, right? Experiences, the stuff that we recognize and see and experience, right? Engagement, how we engage with others mostly, and relationships. Data, information, technology, that doesn't really count in that such a way, right? So how can we be successful doing this? There's a question here from John Claudette. What can we learn from YouTubers? Well, they're engaging, they provide experiences, and they build relationships. And if we can do that, I think we'll be successful. It will be different than doing it in person, but I think this is the thing that we need to do to differentiate. And that's what we can learn from YouTubers. Albeit I would say that YouTube is, of course, entirely different format in terms of the presentation format and everything. So we need to learn how to do that, and this is why I'm so grateful you guys are here. Åsa, would you tell us briefly where we can find more about yourself?
Yeah, I have a web page called degermarkconsulting.se, and you can also find me on LinkedIn, where I post different activities I run. And if you need help with your corporate online conference, you know where to find me, and I'll be happy to support.
Great, thank you very much. Of course, on my own end, all you have to do is Google for GERD, G-E-R-D, and first you'll find the gastrointestinal reflux disease, which is one step ahead of me. But right after that, I'm second GERD on the internet. Just look for Gerd Futurist, you'll see all my stuff. I'll share quickly here the results. I think you'll find this entertaining. So we have a lot of people saying they had a lot to learn, and I totally agree with this. Right? And please do send us your feedback. We're going to send all the links out. I think this is happening automatically on Zoom in one day. But for the time being, please go to futurewithgerd.com tonight and look at the blog, and you'll see all of the details and the post and the slides and the whole 9 yards. And do join us for the rest of the show. And thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure. Thanks to the panelists, Antoni, Åsa, also Soha. Thank you for moderating skillfully as ever, and good luck in the future, and remember, the future is better than we think.
Okay.
Thank you. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye.